you're very welcome back. Law Belton. May Day today, of course, in traditional times meant the start of summer, and when it came to many, many customs of the day, of course. Here to tell us more about that is our regular folklorist, Shane Lehane. We are thrilled to have you back with us, Shane.
Thank you.
Back for May Day, the big day. Beginning of summer?
Absolutely, you know. Saura, Banyan and Nauna, Hugamur Fain and Saura Lane. And I don't know what it is, when I got up this morning, actually I went out and I did the usual, put my hands down, washed my face in the May morning dew. But you know, it really has a sense of we're beginning something new. Yeah. You know, there's that great body of tradition, that body of change, looking at the blossom on the apple trees, getting ready, you know, everything is about to start.
It's all birth. It's just total birth now.
Yeah. What's the whole thing with washing your face again, Shane?
Well, there's lots of magical things always on Belton on the 1st of May, and the smoke coming out of the chimney, the first smoke to come out, something ethereal, something that is there and then disappears. So there's lots of magical tradition about Dew.
All positive though?
Not always. No. I have to say that, you know, this is a time of the year when lots of good luck and bad luck changes place. So people pick this cusp of the year, the dawn this morning, just before the sun came up over the horizon. This was a day to get rid of some bad things. So lots of pishogues and lots of cursing went on, lots of ridding people
like of dead animals.
Yeah, you would throw maybe some of an animal maybe that had slung, that was no longer, was kept maybe in the dung heap, and then would be put onto somebody else's land on this day.
So
to take the misfortune away,
from yourself.
But was it taken away from you and giving it to the other person?
Exactly, you're getting it off your domain and you're giving it to someone else. Preferably you might give it to no man's land.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, actually, we have the Killeens, for example, the Kaloonig, these areas where, changelings and fairy changelings and so on were placed. Quite often you got it as far away from where you were as at present.
What's this creature?
This is a nice illustration, not too nice illustration, I have to say, of a changeling, because we have the notion that the one day that the fairies could take you away was on the 1st of May, today. And if they did, they replaced you with a changeling, an old fairy that looked something like the child. And sometimes a lot of our traditions, a lot of our folk tales are about uncovering the old man or the old fairy that's within the child.
So they take the child and the child is replaced with this change. So what happens is then? The family would hardly leave him into the house.
No, that he'd be causing havoc. He'd be crying and roaring. He wouldn't be eating anything. He'd be getting sick and everything of that sort. And the family were demented by it. And what used to happen then was that someone would come in and they would test out to see if there was a fairy or if it was a child. One of the ways they would do it is that they might take a big brimming glass of whiskey, and of course this little fella would be mad for a drink himself, you see, or else he might play a tune on the fiddle, and when it would come to a nice part of the tune, he'd hit the wrong note, and the fairy would jump up and say, "Hey, give me that," and I'd play it properly for you.
So people believe that their children were changelings?
Well, it's a terrible thing, really, because in many ways the folk tales and the stories about the fairies disguise the fact that if there was anything wrong with your child, if it was maybe physically unusual, if it was mentally unusual, maybe it was a floppy baby, something of that sort, it could be kind of thought of as being a changeling or a fairy, and quite often it was neglected, and therefore you had this sense of let that go away. And
so this happened.
Absolutely.
So people believed that if there was something, as you said, wrong with the child, that it was a fairy inside them.
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore they weren't given a normal burial. They were taken away to as I said, the Killeens and so on, and they weren't given the official burial.
But were children left to die, babies left to die? Or have we any proof of that?
I think we have some proof of it, and I think that the number of I suppose burials that we have would certainly suggest that. You know, many people would suggest unbaptized babies, but there's the whole sense of anyone who was considered to be different or unusual, or where there was supernatural interference, wouldn't be left into what they call consecrated. Kind of serious.
Yeah, these fairies used to steal the odd wife as well.
There's a great old story. I love a story that I remember long ago. It's always one that comes to mind. There was this man, and his wife passed away supposedly on the 1st of May, and of course, being a man, he was no good without the woman, and he started drinking, and he took to the drink so much that he didn't even bother coming home from the pub. It was right throughout the summer months. He used to sleep down. And one night he was asleep anyway, he dreamt, and his wife came to him in a dream, and she said, I'm not dead at all, I've been taken by the fairies, and they've me tied to a white horse, and they've me going up and down, hither and yon, around the country. But on Samhain, on the 1st of November, I'll be coming to the crossroads at midnight, and you have a fine sharp knife with a black handle, and what you do is you cut the band and bring me back into this world. And of course, he doesn't do anything about it, only he dreams about it the second night. And only the third night, he has the same dream again. Does he take any notice of it? So he goes back, he spruces himself up, he starts tidying the house, and like any fella, he's getting ready, he's sharpening his knife every day. And it comes to Halloween, to the 31st of October, the other time when the fairies are about.
The other side.
Yeah, and what happens, he's going to the crossroads, and like all Irishmen, he arrives a bit early, and what happens is that he says he'll go into the pub, and he'll just have one or two just to get his strength together, of course. And when he's inside, fellas are standing in more pints and he's drinking.
What happens, like?
Okay, and what happens, like, one drink, of course, is a pint and a double, like, so that's, he's drinking away. And then he says, looks at the old watch, he says, look, lads, I have a bit of business there, about 5 to 12, he goes out. And of course, he's all over the place, and he sees his wife coming along the road in the moonlight, and there she is, and he's so drunk he can't do anything about it. And she looks at him, she says, you fool, she says, you idiot, there's me, gone with the fairies forever, and you had the chance to get me away. So with that, I suppose that the moral is don't be drinking too much and so on. So there are stories about women being taken and children being taken very, very regularly, right throughout the folklore.
We have fairy forts all around the country though, Shane, don't we?
Yeah, the more I talk to people about the fairies, they always call them the ring forts that are there.
Forts, yeah.
And they're always called the fairy lists or the fairy fort. And what's really interesting about them is that they have these souterrains or underground areas. I have a background in archaeology, and inside in the ring forts, you excavate them, you find these huge underground areas, mainly for keeping hostages, for slaves, for storing food and so on. But people thought that they were the passage into the other world, and therefore anything above this ground is where you and I are. Anything under the ground, through a cave, through a megalithic tomb, through a souterrain in a ring fort, so people were afraid to touch the ring forts.
They're still afraid to do it.
Is that the same thing when it comes to the fairy trees?
Absolutely, yeah. The fairy trees are amazing. The shkiak, as I call them, the old thorns and a lone bush. It's all right when they're everywhere else, but a lone bush in the centre of a field. And it's interesting, they have the May blossom, of course. They're out at the moment. So you've got that beautiful display of white flowers that are there. But you never bring those flowers into the house. And the thorn, if you go at them, people quite often long ago, they got jabbed by a thorn, they were infected, they got septicemia, and they ended up dying. And people thought that the fairies had got them with a dart, as it were, and the blast or something.
You know, I'm sitting here now and I'm believing everything you're saying myself. I'm not surprised that John Bishop, the comedian, when he met you, was fascinated by you. Where did you meet him?
I was delighted with that. I didn't know who John Bishop was. I had no idea in the world who he was. And I got a phone call through a mutual friend who had been working on some television programme who had been working with John. He said, you have to meet Shane. Would you go and chat to him? So I met him up in the university, sat down. There was a television crew there. We were chatting just like we're chatting now. I was telling him all the stuff about the fairies. The guy was absolutely gobsmacked, and I found him one of the most interesting people to talk to, because he just had a real interest in what I was saying. And most people think the fairies are Tinkerbell-like and they're all very scary.
Disneyland fairies.
He got into the Killeens and the
dark
side of it. Well. And so much so, I said, look, I have to go and give a lecture. He said, can I come to the lecture? So he came to the lecture and all, and he brought the television crew in and the whole lot. So
people are still afraid of it, because you'd even still hear stories that people would knock down a fairy ring on their land, something bad would happen to their family. People, I'd actually believe that. I believe it.
Even out where I live, out in the lovely hinterland of Vickerstown and so on, just up from me, there's a ring fort. There's a story of a man who was there, and he was, a number of years back, he was given the job of levelling a part of the ring fort. He had very much money, he got paid to do it. When he was coming down from the job, he jumped down off a ditch, he hurt his leg got he went into bed, he got bed sores, and he died afterwards. Yeah. So you hear these stories.
Shane, you're scary.
No, you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful.
I know you believe in Pisholy and stuff, don't you?
I wouldn't do anything with a fairy ring.
No, fairy rings. And you hear the great professor of archaeology, Professor O'Kelly, now he was the man who excavated Newgrange. He was asked at a conference one time whether he believed in the fairies, and he said, absolutely. And why did he say that? Because he said that would preserve the archaeological sites from Lehane.
Shane, great to have you again now.
Come on, Shane. Thank you, sir.
Very, very good.
Now,